If we are to offer true compassion to Canadians, we must offer choice in dying, and that choice must include the right to die. In 2004, a Globe and Mail poll asked Canadians this question: should Canada legalize merciful euthanasia if the patient wants to die and the process takes place under a doctor's supervision? 83% said yes. Let me repeat that. Should Canada legalize merciful euthanasia if the patient wants to die and the process takes place under a doctor's supervision? 83% said yes. For the last 20 years, Gallup Canada has been posing a similar question. Where a person has an incurable disease that is not immediately life-threatening and causes that person great suffering, do you or do you not think that a competent doctor should be allowed by law to end the patient's life through mercy killing if the patient has made a formal request in writing? For the last 20 years, over 3/4 of Canadians have said yes. These are just numbers. Big numbers, but numbers nonetheless. Today, I want to talk to you about two of the stories behind these numbers. First, I want to speak to you today about Elizabeth MacDonald. Elizabeth was not quite 30 years old when she was diagnosed with MS. She had picked up a relatively virulent strain, and while many people can live for years with MS, her condition was much more dire than that. She sold her small printing business, and gradually her life got smaller and smaller. She suffered great pain. When asked by her doctor on a scale of 1 to 10 to rate her pain, she said, 12. She said, my bones feel like they are splitting apart. When I look at my leg, I can't believe that the bones aren't poking through it. And yet, ultimately, it was not the pain that was driving her to hasten her death. It was her fear of ending her life paralyzed, immobilized, that her quality of life would be completely missing. In 2006, she decided to end her life. Her doctor had been prescribing her morphine, which she stockpiled. She took the pills, trying to die of an overdose. She was unsuccessful. 36 hours later, when she woke up, she was in anguish. She had wanted desperately to die. She turned to her husband and said, I cannot do that again. I cannot try to die alone a second time. You have to help me. And Eric did. Though it was a significant burden on the couple's financial resources, they traveled together to Switzerland, where Elizabeth saw a doctor who affirmed the incurable nature of her disease and the suffering that she was enduring. And then she traveled to Dignitas in Switzerland, where she was able to have the death with dignity that she wanted. But at what cost? Putting aside the financial costs borne by the couple, the much greater costs of the loss of those last few months of her life. Because Elizabeth had to travel to Switzerland while she was still well enough to travel, she lost precious months, and Eric lost that time that he might have shared with her. If we are to be truly compassionate, we need to offer people the right to die. We need to offer choice in dying. I recently met with a client in the West Coast near here who wanted to die. I'll call her Anna Johns. Anna has ALS, a disease that is progressively robbing her of her ability to move, a disease that will ultimately kill her when her chest muscles are no longer able to help her breathe. She wanted information about how she could hasten her own death when the quality of her life became unbearable to her. I was prepared to respect Anna for her decision. I was completely unprepared for how very much I would like her. She spoke with great good humor about the many blessings she'd have in her life, and even about the trials that she now faced. Her difficulty, she could no longer scratch the back of her neck, or the frustration of not being able to pick up and eat blueberries. In an ideal world, Anna would have the right to die, the right to the death that she wants, a physician-assisted death with dignity. Those who oppose legislation for the right to die, or dying with dignity, as it's called in Oregon, believe that it will put the vulnerable in our population at risk, that people who are ethnic or women might be forced or coerced to adopt euthanasia against their wishes. Margaret Batten out of the University of Utah did a study to determine if there was any validity to those fears. She looked at the Oregon data, available since 1994, and she looked at the data from the Netherlands. What she did find was that there was indeed one group that seemed to be overrepresented in the data. That group was individuals who were white, male, well-educated, and middle class. We do not have to forego this legislation to protect the weak and the vulnerable. Rather, if we are to be truly compassionate, we need to have this legislation so people have choice in dying, so people have the right to die. On September 11th, 2001, thousands of people went to work in the World Trade Centers. Many of them worked on the upper levels of the two towers, the levels above where the planes entered. Most of those people died that day. Before they died, many of them were faced with a terrible choice. Perhaps alone, perhaps with their colleagues, maybe in their offices, or maybe in an area of refuge. As they waited for rescue, the flames from the attack drew closer and closer. They would have felt an incredible heat and seen and felt the hairs on their arms singe as the flames got closer and closer. And then they would have had a hellish choice, a choice that I hope you or I never have to make, a choice between waiting for the flames to consume them or taking an object, perhaps a chair, and smashing a window and hastening their death by jumping to the pavement below. Those people didn't go to work that day looking to die any more than you or I went to work this morning looking to die. But when they were faced with that hellish choice, many of them chose to hasten their death. Likewise, Canadians don't choose great suffering. They don't choose to have incurable or terminal illnesses. But at some point, when that is foisted upon them, they do want to make a choice. They want, in some cases, to choose the right to die. If we are to be truly compassionate, we need to offer choice in dying, and that choice needs to include the right to die. Hollywood would have us believe that death happens as kind of a last goodbye. With our loved ones gathered around our bed, we finish off our final business and go gracefully into the night. As Sherwin Nuland says in his international bestseller, How We Die, I have rarely seen death that is dignified.